This is based off of reviews, and let me put it up real quick here, from China. And I put the links in my review, but I got it from this YouTuber as well as this Ken on Billy. And in at the end of it all, even though we don't have the TVs, and we've talked about how the X95J, like all TVs, may be region specific, right? Because if you guys remember, QN90A Samsung in the USA, there's only one 9 series for 4K TVs. But in Europe, you have a QN90 version that has an IPS panel, that has one without the One Connect box, one with the One Connect box. And there's a lot of confusion in certain regions because the numbers are so similar. And so no differently, I'm not going to assume that the X95J in China will be identical to what we have, just in case. But I think there's enough information there to lead us to a few generalities. And I think this is kind of like getting us through some of the disappointments that I think a lot of people will have. And I'll just run through it real quick, because did you get a chance to see any of those early reviews in Chinese and try to translate it?
Yeah, I saw. It's kind of funny, actually.
It is. Yeah, so here we go. Real quick. This is what I noticed was very different, very similar. X95J, X90J, identical hardware. Other than the number of dimming zones, they're indistinguishable behind the panel, right? And that led me to think, wait a minute. And they share the XR processing chip. So unlike previous years where there was, I think, a pretty significant difference between the mid-tier and the 4K flagship from Sony, this year they may be closer than ever, because probably to save money. Sony doesn't want to create an entire manufacturing line to separate the two. They're trying to keep it as inexpensive as possible to manufacture two different TVs, but ultimately they're sharing a lot of the common internals, right? The biggest difference is the number of dimming zones. X90J significantly less, 65-inch is 60 dimming zones, which is the same as last year and the year before. And this is where I'm most disappointed. I was hoping for over 100. And you don't get over 100 until you get over 85 inches. So I'm assuming a lot of you guys are wondering, whoa, what's happening here with these dimming zones? And
60s no bueno for a TV in 2021, man. Especially a flagship. Come on, man.
Yeah. And we're talking even mid-tier TVs from Hisense and TCL will have more than 60 this year. So yeah, it's quite disappointing. But then we see where Sony's focusing its strength, which is the image processing. Jumping down. Okay, now we have actual measurements here. And this is from Ken's video. And what I noticed is, yes, it is brighter than the X90J, but it's not bright in terms of LCD TVs. It doesn't even get as bright as Samsung's TV last year, barely, right? And this is where a lot of people will be disappointed. There were rumors that it would be super bright and it could compete with the QNED 90, with the Samsung, but the reality is it's an incremental upgrade. And Keep It Classy Tech has a good comment here, so it's probably inaccurate. Maybe it's not accurate because it's a handheld tester. So there's that. So hopefully it'll be brighter than what we found. Now, Keep It Classy, what's your prediction? Is it going to be brighter than the handheld or less bright? So I look forward to seeing what Classy brings to the table when he gets that TV.
I think one of the things he meant to say is that they were saying that the X90J was like a 900 nit TV, and he said that ours here is only 700 or whatever. So I think that was a comment that he had made, that the one that they were testing was probably too bright, or it was measured too bright.
Right. And okay, so now the most important thing is content, right? It doesn't matter if you win the specs or the brightness wars, or you have all these great patterns and you beat everyone in the patterns, but you watch movies. And this is from Rogue One. This is from Ken's review as well. And I noticed that, okay, in some of these scenes where HDR comes into play, the X95J is definitely brighter. The planet is brighter. The laser beam is brighter, right? So, okay, now you see the difference, and you go down further. Here we go, the explosion, clearly brighter, significantly brighter, obviously. So the 200 to 300 to 400 nits in these scenes, that's when that makes a difference. But the QN90A is a couple of hundred nits brighter than the X95J. So the hope was that the X95J would get close to the QN90A, but we'll see. I'll have the X95J as well, so I can compare it to the QN90A head to head, but I don't think its darkroom control will be as good. And that's what takes us to kind of the next topic. There's more brightness, right? Okay, black levels. This is where the X95J is going to be falling behind Hisense, TCL, and probably LG and Samsung. You can't get good blooming control and black levels if you don't have enough dimming zones. If we start with the native contrast, what surprised me the most is how low the native contrast of the X95J is compared to last year and compared to the X90J.
Yeah.
And it could be explained, it is the ultra wide viewing angle. That's the thing. This is what's causing the native contrast to drop, but no one watches TV without local dimming on. If you turn on the local dimming, it's up to above 5,000, which is good, right? It's better than the X90J, definitely an improvement over the X90J last year, but you need to have your local dimming on, and which most people do. So we'll just assume that native contrast is definitely an improvement over the X90J and the 950H. And this is why you have the wide viewing angle. And this is a great measure that Ken did. The off axis by 10 degrees maintains color saturation. Then you go up to 30 degrees and you look how much the X90J drops. And I think for people who are getting the really large TVs and you're sitting off angle, the X95J's ultra wide viewing angle does make a difference based on what Ken's measurements show. So I can see what they did there. And I think it really is worth the compromise because you're going to have dimming zones on. So it's not a big deal that native contrast without dimming zone drops. But this is where the processing comes into play. So Sony last year has the same number of dimming zones on the 950H as on the X95J this year. But just by improving the math, the algorithm, right? Whatever it is that the XR chip or the local dimming zone algorithm is doing, definitely has improved it over the 950H. But here's the thing that not many people realize. The X900H was improved last year as well. The X900H last year had the improved local dimming algorithm that the X950H did not have. And a lot of people complained about that. Hey, wait a minute. How come your lower level TV has a better dimming zone algorithm? Well, this year, the X95J receives that algorithm update, and you see that improvement. And now the question is this. Both the X95J and the X90J, they both share the same algorithm, the same processor. What happens? So here you have the difference. And this is where I am most disappointed. What Sony gives in more dimming zone, it takes away because it's brighter. So more dimming zones in this left corner, right? On the X95J, you see, okay, deeper blacks, better control of blooming. But then in the brightest areas, it's trying to be brighter, right? It can get brighter. So it gets brighter. But what happens? Because it has only 60 dimming zones, it ends up looking as, or worse, possibly, than the X90J in terms of blooming. In the brightest areas, its blooming is not better than the X90J. Now, in the areas where it's more subtle, right? Yeah, it's better. But this area right here, it's not better. And this is where Sony is struggling with only 60 dimming zones. As good as this processing is, when two TVs shares the same processing, but you don't give this enough dimming zones, it cannot separate itself. And so this is the moving ball test, right? And what you're going to see is the X90J has a lot more blooming, obviously, than the X95J, but not always. Sometimes, like right there, the X95J looks just as bad. Sometimes it looks better. And very rarely does it look worse. And the reason it would look worse is it gets brighter in some areas, and that's when the blooming goes out of control. So Sony is really trying hard, but when you only have 60 dimming zones, there's only so much you can do. And this is a really good comparison between the two because it's hard to distinguish them. I mean, yeah, the 90J is slightly worse, but the 95J, because it gets brighter, is also going to be noticeably blooming too. All right, and this is from, I think, Gravity, if I'm not mistaken, right? You're in space, and this right here, as it gets brighter and brighter, that's where the 90J shows that it will bloom more in those brightest scenes. So at least here, the X95J's additional dimming zones really does help. And I think that's kind of, well, obviously you would think it would help, but it could be better. It could be better if it had more dimming zones. And that's what hurts the 95J. Because I know its processing is great. Look what it does with 60 dimming zones, but what could it do with 300, right? I mean, even the QNED has 576 dimming zones for a 65-inch. That's almost 10 times as much for what I think is going to be a similar price to the X95J. That really hurts. Okay, let's go into color real quick. It looks nearly identical. X90J actually looks like it has possibly a wider color gamut. Now, obviously, we might need classy and whoever with very professional meters to double check it, but this is kind of consistent with the other Chinese reviewer, right? The one on YouTube, he found that the 90J slightly better, wider color gamut, but it doesn't mean it'll have better color because it comes down to color volume. When it gets bright, what happens? So the X90J actually looks terrible in this comparison. I thought it would look better than it does. So as you can see right here, like, what the heck is happening to Mark Hamill's face, right? It's almost sickly. And it could be a panel variance. It could be they got an X90J that doesn't carry the volume, or it could be just bad calibration. I don't know. I don't speak Chinese. I don't know if it's out of the box. If it's out of the box, this TV definitely needs calibration. What's interesting, though, is over here. The two, close enough. Okay, at least you don't lose anything for the 950H. But then the 950H, because maybe it has a better native contrast, I don't know. It actually looks like it has a bit more color to me, but then it's YouTube, so whatever, right? It's close enough that many people will say, why should I get a 95J when I could get a 950H? Because most of the time, I may not notice a difference. Maybe his jacket is a bit, well, I don't know. Arguably, it's the same. I can't really pull out the differences. So those that have the 950H, this may be a worthwhile comparison. And I think ratings will have a good time comparing these two. But definitely it's better than 90J. So at least you have that in this image, at least.
Yeah, that 90J looks like it's off, you know.
Oh, totally.
It's something, it just looks like maybe it was in a different mode or something. I don't know. You know, sometimes that stuff can happen. I don't know. You know, I have no idea. So who knows?
Yep, absolutely. And here, it's hard to put this on YouTube, and I don't know if you guys can see the difference, but the 95J does have more color volume, more color detail. This is the brightest scene that Ken put up, and you can see that on the 95J, there's a bit more color. On the 90J, it's clipping already, so I think that would be the difference. Maybe Sony's additional dimming zones helping out with that. Hard to say, because they're both VA panels. This one I like. So this is from Aquaman, and Aquaman is one of the brighter movies out there. It is graded to about 4,000 nits at least. This pushes both TVs. In this scene, you got dark areas, you got bright areas, right? So I was a little bit surprised by what I saw. There you go. I processed it. It looks nearly identical, slightly brighter right there. The 95J is slightly brighter on the left, right? And the right there, it's slightly brighter. But it comes down to, wow, these TVs are similar. We're just talking lighting. We're not talking color. Just on the lighting. That's pretty good. The 90J, to me, becomes a great deal if it can get cheap enough, meaning when the 95J is released, how much cheaper is the X90J? And that is what we're going to ask many of you, because at the end of the day, how much cheaper could the X90J be and not cannibalize sales from the X95J? Because the two will be directly competing with each other, given that they're so similar in this scene. I'll try this one more time. There we go. I mean, that looks very similar to me. But again, I'm taking a recording of a YouTube off of YouTube, so that's what it looks like. All right. Now we can start talking. Hey, TechMed Rainer Richter. How's it going, buddy? I know. Hey, TechMed, it's a new channel. We are not yet monetized, but thank you for thinking of us. If enough of you watch and we get enough watch hours, we will be able to enable Super Chat and Super Stickers. Well, thank you for coming by. And if you guys watch this over and over, share it with your friends, we will eventually be monetized. But the reason why is, yeah, we're not yet at how many thousand hours of watch time?
So let's see. We only need 4,000, and that last stream we did got about 500. So, you go. 8 or less streams, and we'll be there. So it's not, we're not really stressing about it, but the goal is obviously to get it monetized. So, it'll be there a couple months way before Black Friday,
Yeah, that's what I expect too. And I think
that's when people will need all the advice,
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think Oat Dude is spot on. He's feeling better about not waiting for the X95J. Was it worth waiting for? Well, let's look at how Ken graded it, right? So he kind of ranks the TVs that he's been reviewing. Again, I don't speak Chinese. I'm extrapolating here, guys. I could be completely off. This could be the weight of the TVs for all I know. But let's assume that's
pretty funny.
This is picture quality, right?
That's hilarious.
Look where it ranks. Clearly, like I and many others have said, and I'm hoping you will come around, Brandon, the QN98 is the best TV, LCD TV, right? OLED is not listed. Among all the LCD TVs out there, the QN98 clearly heads and shoulders. And then the 950TS is last year's 8K flagship. I had the 900TS, identical image quality, very good, but not as bright. 98 is better. And as I've told many of you, having 8K doesn't improve image quality. It just improves resolution. And that doesn't necessarily mean a better image. If anything, it makes it harder. And so the 95J, clearly a step below. And here's the shocker. Well, maybe not. It's a step below the Hisense U7G Pro, which let's just assume that the U8G is at least as good as the U7G Pro. Now the X95J has that value proposition with the competition because it is better than the 90J, right? About a few points better, a whole segment better. The question, though, is what do you watch? What's your content? And that may determine the difference. And also, maybe the 90J is worse in China than it is in the USA. Like we're talking about, how come it's so dim in China while in the US it's brighter? By making it brighter in the US, does it cannibalize sales of the 95J? So, my closing thoughts, the X90J, pricing, if it's low enough, the 95J is better in color volume and HDR performance, but the 90J's pricing will be critical. And lastly, the U8G is definitely the alternative. The question is this. If you like Google TV, if you like out-of-the-box accuracy, yes, the 95J is the alternative I would choose. But if Google TV, you don't care, you're going to use a Roku stick, out-of-the-box accuracy, you don't care, you're going to calibrate the U8G anyway, suddenly the X95J is less of the value that we hope. Hey, Brian.
What's up, guys? Sorry I'm late.
Don't worry about it, man. We're just going over a quick summary of my earlier review for those who didn't catch that review. And now we're just talking. And so the conclusion, if you didn't catch it, Brian, is that the 95J is better than the 90J in terms of color volume, HDR performance, but not so much better that during dark scenes, the 95J, because it gets brighter, may end up with a little bit more blooming in those brightest areas. But then in the darkest areas where it's not too bright, the 95J does do better with blooming and can get a little bit darker or blacker, right? Deeper blacks. But then the pricing, what does that mean? I mean, how low does the 90J go that it begins to jeopardize sales of the 95J? Or how much better is the 95J? Is it so much better that you have to make the jump? Let's start talking about it. I'm going to start with you, Brian, because I know we've been talking about this earlier, and you're chomping at the bit.
Yeah,
what are your thoughts?
I'm let down by the numbers so far. I mean, my prediction was it was going to be equal to the Z8H 8K
remember.
last year. That's what we were hearing. And I did a video recently saying that the X95 was holding up the rest of the TV space. I put the X90 in a really bad spot because it was too expensive for what it was. So I want to see, as we've all talked here, I need LEDs to improve substantially past the QNFN from a few years ago. And I don't want them going backwards. And I feel like every time they take a few steps forward, they're going back in terms of color volume, or like, don't go backwards at all. I want this to be a noticeable improvement over the 950H. So now what's going to do, it's going to send people running back to last year's panel.
Yeah, the 950H is a great panel. Absolutely.
Yeah, what's up, dude? How you doing, man?
Brandon, what's up, brother?
Hey, we gotta talk offline about I'm being in New York in a couple weeks, man. 3 weeks.
I missed Classy was in New York. I missed him.
Yeah.
So we gotta hook up.
I'll be in New York in September. Don't forget.
You're gonna catch me at a couple Yankee games, maybe. Definitely, I'm gonna be down for, I don't know. It's the Boston, and then 3 games against Twins. So
nice.
Yeah, we gotta figure out when I'm gonna go. But
I'll
definitely hit you up. But this is the thing. I guess if I was to say FOMO and Brian about what I was excited about, would probably be that the TV would be at least as good as last year's, with, like, you said 5 to 10 times as many dimming zones or something, just something where it could rival the Samsung with regards to its level of contrast, but still be, as beautiful with the color as Sony's are. And it's disappointing to hear that it may be a little bit brighter, but has the same number as dimming zones. That's pretty frustrating because, but Sony they handle them well. But when you watch HDR movies, like if you're watching an HDR movie, it's almost immediate that you can see blooming in the wide areas on a Sony. And that's what's frustrating. It's like that just almost immediately turns me off of LCD TVs. I watch a lot of movies, so that gets frustrating.
Well, and that was, again, we were past this with the Z9D and 940E and Q9FN. So when Sony had defaulted and gotten into this, oh no, we want to keep shadow detail, I bought that. And Samsung did the same thing with, hey, we don't want to crush black, so they grayed everything out. I think the QN90A actually figured it out and was a return to form, but I don't know where the heck Sony's going. I mean, honestly, it's changing my thoughts on what I'm going to buy personally, because the 95 was something I was thinking about. And, I'll have one here to go against the X90, which is behind me. But I'm not as hopeful as I was.
And it's so obvious to all of us who have been doing this for a few years now, which is dimming zones. The X95J, Sony knows. I mean, come on. They're engineers. They know exactly what they need to do. And I think this goes into a different conversation about TV companies. What is their end game? Their end game is really to make money, right? It doesn't matter. They're trying to convince us that everything is good, but the reality is this. And I'm going to use Samsung's QN85A and QN90A as a comparison. The QN85A is so much worse than the QN90A. But why is that? For one simple reason, the IPS panel. Because you look at it, it's got the mini LED. It's got 576 dimming zones, and it doesn't necessarily outperform the Q90T with only 80 dimming zones last year. Mm-hmm. Why is that? It's got 576 dimming zones. It's because it's an IPS panel. So here's what kills me. The price difference between an IPS and a VA panel is hardly anything. Let me repeat that. It is like, I don't know, $50, maybe $80. But Samsung, and this is why Samsung didn't put the VA panel on the QN85A. Brian, Brandon, you know this. If you put a VA panel on 576 dimming zones, it would look nearly identical to the QN90A. People are like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Why am I paying $300 more for something? And you can't tell the difference. But you add the IPS panel and suddenly, the QN90 is such a great TV. If Sony could do what it did with only 60 dimming zones, Samsung could do the same thing with 576 dimming zones. Going to 800 sounds great. The reality is, I bet you it would look the same because the U8G with 360 dimming zones looks almost as good as an 800 dimming zone TV. So imagine if Samsung had 576 on the QN85A. At this point, guys, it looks like they need to separate the prices to fit each box. We got the $2,000 TV, we got the $1,400 TV, we got the $800 TV. It's the same TV, and it costs them the same, really, right? The QN85A, the QN90A, the margin of the QN90A must be insanely high because the QN85A is exactly the same TV except for the IPS panel, which is like, what, $80 cheaper? Maybe, yeah. If that. So, I don't know, it's crazy.
I mean, but it's what Brandon said, before. I know we hear a lot in the comments how we're all favoring OLED. And I'm really last on Mohegans. I want to hold on to it. But as he had mentioned, I was watching the A80J and watching some crazy space demo, and the fact that it didn't bloom at all and appeared brighter than it really is due to the contrast ratio, it didn't pull me out. Any of the LEDs in my home, the minute I see blooming now, I immediately snap out of it. I'm like, oh, crap, look at the blooming. So I didn't have that in 2016 or 2017 with those two panels. And we know the dimming zones is all about money, and it's all about making the displays thinner. The Z9G was like 4 inches thick, and no one's really going to buy that because their wife's going to go, what the hell? I'm not putting that in my house. And to me, that's the only reason why mini LED even exists, is not because of better light control. It's because they want to make them thinner. And we talked about this with efficiency. Efficiency very, very rarely means better. Just means cheaper and cheaper to run. And I feel like that's where they're going. And it's a shame because they should just be LEDs. Go as bright as you can, as hard as you can, through as many zones as you can. And I would still be with them, but you cannot. How is this blooming more of an issue than ever?
Can I ask, maybe you just said this, like you could have literally just said it because maybe I didn't hear it, but what about the fact that they can only push so much power into these TVs and output? Like, is that where we're having the issue with the 8K where it has so many dimming zones, but like the QN90A outperforms the QN8900A because, there's regulations that can only dictate so much power? Does that come into play with Sony here where they're trying to be smart and they're trying to use their power in a, certain amount of, in a way that they can manage the TV or what?
So Joey Modern-Wise, who had a channel, told me this last year. He said California's regulations in terms of power would never allow for TVs to push out a certain power output. And then, FOMO and I talked how they gimped one of the Samsungs for the same reason. So yeah, that could be the thing. And we talked about the color filter. For me, I think 8K is the pixel densities to, the increased pixels make it harder to penetrate the light is what hurts them. But they should have figured this out in their R&D before you put the product out, because the 8K should blow away your 4K counterpart, and we're not really seeing that, and that's a shame.
Well, and they're not even as bright as they were a couple of years ago, are they? I mean,
they're not.
Isn't the Q900A or R, like, isn't that brighter?
Yes. Well, our Vizio Quantum P series were approaching 3,000 nits 2 years ago, and I thought we were all going to be at nearly 4,000. And then Samsung, they've been like, oh, this is really, really bright. I'm like, it's 1,200 nits. How is that really, really bright?
So we're hitting two caps. The first cap is EU and maybe USA energy consumption. So on a 4K, right, if you put out a watt of energy on a 4K, you're going to get more light through a 4K panel than the same watt through an 8K panel. So in an 8K panel, you're going to have to put out, let's say, 1.5 watts to get the same brightness. Now you're hitting a problem because for the 8K to look as bright as a 4K, you're burning way too much energy. That's why 8K TVs look dimmer. If they made it to look, they could make it look as bright as a 4K. But then suddenly they're burning through all of their promised reduction in consumption or efficiency, right? Yeah. And so that's one. And the other side of it is if you get above a certain number of nits, the color filters, they start to clip. It's like above 1,800 nits, maybe 1,700. You get color clipping. And that's not a problem with the dimming zone. That's the problem with the color filter and how they're being converted into the rainbow of colors that we have. That's why you have QD OLED, right? The QD layer, the quantum dot color converting layer, allows you to go to 4,000 nits and preserve color. That's why I'm so anxious to see it. But unfortunately, if OLED's driving the brightness, again, you're not going to break 1,200 nits. So you're back to where we were before. So I don't know. It's going to be a while before we can get to above 2000 nits and preserve color volume. We need that quantum dot layer.
Well, and the challenge for everybody in the comments is, for us, it's not a challenge. I mean, anything that the three of us buy is not forever. But for those of us that watch us, that are trying to make that, we brought this up with going with last year's panel with HDMI 2.1. Games like Ratchet and Clank, we talked about that with Digital Foundry. They're using HDMI 2.1 to give you 40 FPS, where you'll need a 120 hertz panel to actually use that feature. So while we're recommending last year, we have TVs with HDMI 2.1 that might be inferior to last year's. So it's like, what do you have to choose? And it's really hard for everybody that follows our logic and advice to make a real purchase. If you and I make a bad purchase, we're like, oh, my bad, we'll get something else.
Right.
But for them, they're buying the end all be all. And, it's just, that's what's frustrating me.
You bring up a good point. So this is a question for both of you and myself. Value, making the purchase. X95J is clearly a good enough TV. It's better than X90J, right? But how much would it have to cost before you recommend it above the X90J? Or what should be that price difference? Obviously, if the X90J is $700, hey, that's so inexpensive. Go with the X90J. But at what point does the X95J's pricing becomes compelling? Given what you guys know about the TVs out there, Brandon, when would you get the X95J or recommend it to your friends?
Well, I think for me, like last year, the X900, X950H, the reason that I recommend them is it was a little brighter, but it was a little brighter even with the extra layer, and it had the viewing angles were better and the anti-reflective coating was better. So not even just it. So it doesn't have to be leaps and bounds better, but it has to be better, right? I mean, same with like last year, the Samsung Q90T and the Q80T. It was like, they're pretty damn close, but there's something that says like, okay, I just want to get the best one because it's the best. So there's a little bit of like, I'll buy it because it's like slightly brighter and slightly better, and it's just the best model. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's tough. I don't know if I could put a number on what, I would pay probably 20 or 30% more to have like better viewing angles and better anti-reflective coating. And if it's a couple hundred nits brighter. But again, I'd like to see it a lot brighter, and I'd like to see it have a lot more dimming zones, So it's kind of like a hodgepodge. And until I got the TV, I couldn't really, I guess like last year, I don't know if I would have bought the X900H just because I saw it and it was really bad with any reflections. Not only was it not super bright, but it was pretty bad with any kind of like the OLEDs were way better handling reflections than the X900H. So,
right.
But in SDR content, it was brighter. So it's kind of it's back and forth. Obviously, that's not a very specific answer, but just kind of giving my positives.
And I have a twist for you, but I'll wait for Brian's answer before we go for the twist, because I have an update for you guys that'll just blow you away.
Nice. I'll keep it short. Last year, it was easier to delineate between the two because the 900H was nowhere near as bright as the 950H. But again, they crippled each other because the 950H did not have HDMI 2.1. So we went for that. Now it's more difficult if the 900H is more colorful and cheaper. The 950H is, close to the X95 this year, has HDMI 2.1, but isn't as colorful and is much more expensive. So it's going to go back into the HDMI 2.1 discussion if that's what you really want. And for those that game, it really is going to become a necessity if PS5 continues to update their games using HDMI 2.1 to give us 40 FPS. So I just want it to not have blooming. So right now, it's a little bit harder for me to recommend because if it's got, in the X90 does a decent job, but I want it to be a lot better.
What they should do? They should just make it so that the widescreen bars, they don't bloom as much. They just don't light up as much. That way you don't get all that blooming up in the bars.
I think Samsung just shuts them off. I think that's their trick. They do something where they use that part of the screen. I'm not sure if that's true, but
they have enough dimming zones to do it. They do a very good job of recognizing it. Okay, but you mentioned two things, Brian. One is gaming features and pricing. So the Samsung QNED is now $2,200 already. This is before the release of the 65-inch X95J. We don't know what its pricing is. Rumor has it is it's supposed to be between 1800 and 1900. What are you guys hearing for the launch price of the X95J?
It's changed a lot since we reported on it was supposed to release 3 months ago, and it was 25 or something. I can't remember exactly what it was.
I think the X950H was like $25.99 last year, wasn't it? Something like that.
But the issue with what we're talking about is the 950H launched in March.
Yeah, no question.
So now you're launching like a year after the QN90A. That's why I made that video about it holding it back. Now that Samsung knows it's coming, drop the price.
Right. Already it's 2200. If Samsung drops it another 100, 2100, where does the X95J have to be the more compelling value? Now, I know a lot of people are going to say to me, oh, it has Dolby Vision and so forth. And granted, Dolby Vision does make a difference, but the QN90A has way better darkroom control, way better, deeper blacks, just all the stuff, the blooming. It's got 800 dimming zones, and its VRR works out of the box. And Amazon is currently selling a switch, an HDMI 2.1 switch that's promised. I'm saying promised, no one's verified it, but they're promising it to be able to pass 4K 120, HDR, Dolby Vision. So it's like what, $50? It was less than $50. So with an inexpensive switch, you plug that into this Samsung. Now you have two HDMI 2.1 ports and working VRR. So suddenly this is a viable gaming TV for a few $100s more. How much less does the X95J have to be to choose that above the QN90A?
I mean, it's got to be less, definitely. I think the sweet spot may be somewhere in that like $1,500-$1,600 range. I mean, that's still pretty expensive for a Sony, because what is the, well, I mean, the Hisense is already down to like $1,100, isn't it? That's comparable. And so what is the X90J at? Like is that at the 1,500 or
it's 1,500? Yeah, let me check right now real quick. Yeah, the X90J is still too expensive, in my opinion.
I mean, that's got to be down to I realistically, what I would say is I would probably want that to be like 1,000 or less, as it was last year. It was a 65-inch around 1,000.
It's still 1,500. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. I mean, they're selling them right now. People are just buying them. They just rolled them out at Costco. They're everywhere. So people are, people that are buying. They don't really care. People got money this summer, man. All that COVID money's. They got all that COVID money sitting in their pockets still.
and Michelle has a good point. Hey, Michelle Alexandria. FOMO on tech. At some point, the technical quality of the content itself needs to be better. Only way to notice picture quality difference is really between the brands, because everyone processes color differently. So you have a great point, Michelle. I think Netflix is doing a great job putting out good Dolby Vision content. And this is where I think Samsung, they're going to have to bite the bullet and do Dolby Vision, because I see a noticeable difference between Samsung with Dolby Vision on, Netflix, or Sony with Dolby Vision and Samsung without Dolby Vision. The color is very different. It's not even a little bit different. So this is where I think Netflix, Amazon Prime, all these streaming services, once they start getting their Dolby Vision color grading down and it looks really good, you're raising the quality of the visuals, and Samsung is unable to convert HDR10 to match it, that's when people will stop buying the Samsung. I don't think we're there yet, because its darkroom control is really good. So
yeah, make sure everyone, if you can, real quick, like the video. It's good just to give it a thumbs up. It'll help us. It'll just kind of spread the love out there quick and let this video be seen by people that aren't, typically watching this channel. And that's obviously what everyone wants, to have as many people as possible on these videos, or on these streams. So thank you for liking the video.
And we were talking about this before, guys. You mentioned Costco, Brian. So he got a QN90A, 75-inch, 5-year warranty with delivery and setup for $3,000 and change, including tax. Let's just say $3,000 even, including tax. That's not bad. Actually, that's pretty good for a flagship 75-inch. I'm kind of surprised. What do you think about that, guys?
It's dropped. I mean, it's been that, and then went back up. It's been that for like a week or so. The best part about Costco is you have that 90 days, no questions asked. You have up to a year covered by them and then by Samsung themselves. So it's a great deal. But as we spoke yesterday off camera, was the only issue with Costco is being able to know what part number is what. Sometimes it's simple, like the LG C1 is the LG C1. The X95 is like the X90HC16. I mean, it's like it's hard to know what's what. They have. I did it. My video coming out in a couple hours. They're all together, so you have them all smashed together. So again, we're talking about things technically, and most people don't give a crap. They're just going to grab a Samsung or grab. So I think until people start really wanting that change, they're going to buy Samsung because of the name.
Right.
Same with Sony.
Marketing. It's pushing its marketing. Neo QLED is everywhere on Twitch. I mean, I have to say Samsung's marketing team is probably one of the best out there, if not the best. I'm surprised that LG's marketing pushing OLED hasn't been as effective.
And yeah, I mean, LG is just killing them with amount. Just C1, BX, A1. They're just throwing it out there. And OLEDs are affordable now. We spoke about that yesterday too. Is LEDs, not only are they getting beat in picture quality and now in price, is that people are attracted to that thin design. You walk into a Costco, you see how thin it is. But I saw an A80J yesterday next to an X90. The X90 looked better because of how bright Costco is. So if I'm the average person, I'm like, oh, give me that one. That one looks better. And they're not close in terms of picture quality. But, you're buying tires and ribeyes there. So, I mean,
throw a TV in the truck.
Got me some ribs.
Peanut butter pretzels.
Do you get a chance, or has Value Electronics brought out the QNED 90 yet? Or the QNED?
So the QN90, I talked to Robert today, is not till 2 weeks into August.
Man.
So same with the X90 and the Z9J. So they're being pushed back. The UK announced it'll be in a couple weeks. So, I mean, I'll have the X95 here. But here's the thing. I don't know if I want it here. That's how this has changed. My thoughts on it is I had the ability. I still have the X90 here. I would have the X95 from Value Electronics. And to me, it's not about clicks and views. If I'm not interested in the display, I won't have it. So I'll review it in store and we'll show it in store. I hope it's impressing me enough to bring it home. But as we know, these are not easy to bring home.
Right.
But QNED, again, you're delayed so far. Instead of waiting for it, I'll grab a Samsung. And that's what people are saying. They're like, forget this. Why am I waiting for these other brands?
Well, to your point, right? Sam's Club, 5-gallon jars of mayo and throw a Samsung in the truck bed.
Yeah, PO. Hell yeah. Exactly. Grab some bread, some ribs, rotisserie chicken, and grab your favorite TV.
And I remember the rumor that on the Costco specs, the QN90, that's what they call the QN90A, they had 4 HDMI 2.1 ports, which got people excited, but apparently it's a typo. And that's the kind of confusion, right? I mean, you got a typo, you got the name slightly different, and then people
the 9DA.
Like the 9DA.
Yeah, but we talked about...
That's funny that they use D because it's like 90, 9D.
Exactly.
It literally sounds almost identical.
But even being behind one of the 900H Costco variants, if you look at the HDMI ports, it doesn't say 4K 120 anywhere. So I'm curious if they've left that out. I know that my plasma, when they sold it at Costco, it had the anti-reflective screen on the lower end. So they add things and they also take things away. The problem is, how do you find out which is which? There's so little coverage on them. Yeah. You have no idea what's what.
Yeah. And well, now that we kind of have an idea, so let's just put the QNED on the side because it's not out yet. But we have a little bit of information about the X95J. In the context of buying recommendations, when would I recommend the X95J? I was thinking about it. Let's just assume its pricing is correct, right? It's going to price it competitive. Let's say $1,700, $1,600. And the 90J goes further down, $1,100 or $1,200. I would recommend the X95J for those who don't plan to calibrate their TVs and they're not critical watchers. They've never had an OLED. And I think in a medium lit room, the blooming won't be so bad, but it'll still be noticeable. It's so hard though, because the U8G is out there for a little bit less. It has to be a combination of you hate the Android TV on the Hisense, you like the Google TV, but if you're going to buy an external streamer, I'd still end up recommending the U8G. So I'm having a hard time trying to convince myself when I would do it, other than, oh, you don't have to calibrate it. But then for $300, you can calibrate the U8G, or $400 maybe, and now you're at the same price. What are your thoughts with the U8G versus the X95J? if you have calibration included for a similar price now out the door.
I mean, last year I had the the H9G and the X950H, and I thought it was pretty much a wash, man. Besides like the H9G looking had a little bit of a green tint to it. I mean, it looked pound for pound almost identical, and I was like really impressed. So if the UAG is better and the X95J isn't, I mean, it does have the XR processor, and then with that, the Hisense was a little bit slow when you're messing around, like just pulling up menus and stuff. So you can't avoid menus, right? You can avoid like going in the apps, but you got to pull up a menu and get in. The Hisense is a little bit like, older school menu. It takes a little longer to mess around. I'm a little bit more familiar and comfortable with Sony. But like this year in the Sony TVs, I'm not stoked that you have to like pull up 3 different screens just to like attach your Bluetooth headphones. Before I could just click on at the bottom of the Google TV, and it would just click, and it would be connected. Now I got to go in and I leave like the input I'm on to connect to my headphones, and then I have to go back to the screen, and it's super annoying. So there's all these little things. There's all these little things, but I mean, really, if you can get over the name of Hisense, man, the Hisense TV is great. And then, you got other ones here you're going to pull up and show too that are, now these IPS with the more dimming zones, it's like, can they get close to these VA panels and become competitive? Who knows?
Well, they can if they if they don't have blooming and they're bright and vibrant. Then do we care if it's an IPS panel? If these VA panels have blooming, and like what you said about TCL and Hisense, that lack of elegance with their their systems is hard.
Yeah, the TCL is really bad too. I'm not a big fan of TCL's Roku.
Yeah,
not at all.
It's like Roku everywhere.
Yeah, and I actually didn't mind the QN85A sitting straight on was a pretty damn bright TV, to be honest, and it looked pretty good. I mean, I thought the fact that it didn't have that black level actually benefited it, because it was like it didn't crush all the highlights, So I kind of liked the QN85A, but when you got off angle a little bit, it just fell apart. And I think Keep It Classy said the same thing about the X90J. When you look off angle, it kind of falls apart too. Oh, lost FOMO. Can you hear me?
Yep, I got you. I don't know if are we still on, everyone?
Oh yeah, we're good. We're good.
So Keep It Classy had it up about the QNED being available at Best Buy. It all depends on where you're located. Robert, being in New York, a lot of times these displays are available on other parts of the country first, depending on where they're shipping from. So they may be available. I'm not sure where he's from, but they may be available where he is.
So Keep It Classy, I think, is in Ohio. Now I just checked
New York
a couple of states.
New York's been getting things late. So even though what's funny about Value Electronics, they can ship it to you, but he still can't ship it to you. So I'm not sure if he can get it Best Buy. That's great, but
it's sold out. It looks. I mean, maybe it's sold out. It doesn't mean that it wasn't carried, because I just checked the QNED 99, and it's available now. So you could walk into. Well, I don't know if it's in the warehouse, right?
They don't have it at my Best Buy. I'll tell you that. They have freaking Nanos. I mean, my Best Buy is a mess where I am. There's nothing there.
Here, let me add. So if anyone is out there interested in buying the QNED 99, right? It is there right now. Thanks for letting us know, Classy. So, $3,500. That's a premium that I don't know. I don't think it'll be better than the QN90A. I could be wrong. I cannot wait for you to check it out and let us know, Brian.
Well, it's all where it's supposed to be positioned. I mean, the Nano Cell, when they first released that, or at least talked about it a number of years ago, they came off like it was going to be this high-end thing, if you guys remember. But the QN, the Nano Cell that was 8K, that one was gorgeous. But if this looks like that, I can see that being a possibility. But again, you've waited too long to jump into the game. So how can you price it higher than the QN90A or the QN900A? And the 800, they're coming down in price as well. Yeah. So they put themselves in a really bad spot to even matter.
Here's a great question for all of us. Thank you, Aaron, for this question. Simple question. What would you buy this year for yourselves if you had to choose one OLED and one non-OLED? So for me, A90J, Sony's Master Series, and of course the QN90A. Those are my choices. How about you guys? We'll start with you, Brandon. What would you choose if you could choose one OLED and one non-OLED this year?
Well, I mean, I excuse me. I have two A90Js, so obviously that is the one that I chose. But I would very highly recommend the A80J because of the price difference. For most people, I think that and the C1 are fantastic deals. And then I don't know if I could pay the same kind of price for a LED TV. That's the thing. I have a hard time with that.
Get two OLEDs.
Yeah, well, that or I would probably go with like the Hisense at like half the price.
Yeah,
you know,
there you go.
Like I have a Hisense here. Like if I'm gonna watch an LED TV, I kind of see all the flaws, so I would probably take a more value pick on it. But I would like to give the QN90A another shot. I am going to, so I am going to buy one, and I'll have one here. So then I'm going to give it a second whirl and make sure that I give it a good shot because, you know, I got that as my first TV of the year, and it was just more that I saw the downsides of the things that I didn't like last year versus like the positives of this year, you know. And like Brian and other people have said that there's a lot of firmware updates I've done and worked on the algorithm and things like that I hadn't gotten a chance to check out. And that's something you get when you have more time. But just with the kind of the faster decisions I had to make, I just ended up, you know, moving on. So, yeah.
Yeah. How about you, Brian?
And that's a real buyer's experience, though, Brandon. I mean, you bought it like a real person would have bought it. And here we are talking about the QNED being available before we can see it. Yeah. They're going to buy it and say, I don't like the way this thing looks and send it back. For me, I just got the A80J at 77 inches in my living room. Personally, I love that display. For my main panel and the home theater, the X95 was on that list to some degree. The Z9J and the QN90A isn't in the running simply because of the quality control of Samsung, especially at 85 inches. So I can't personally, I can recommend it, but I can't buy one myself for that. And I love Dolby Vision. So, and I need more HDMI 2.1. So I'm leaning again towards another OLED. But if I was going to go for an LED at this moment, it would have to be the QN90A if I could get a clean panel.
Now, we talked about this yesterday. Didn't you say your Costco had the A80J?
Yeah, the film I'm dropping in an hour and a half will show you the A80J is now.
Okay, Jim, Costco, order it. You might not be able to buy it at your warehouse, but definitely the Costco online will have it if it's at Brian's warehouse. So, yeah Costco's got it.
And they had the one, I was shocked. They had the 77 inch too. So I was blown away. But then, you know, one of the earlier guys bought a QN90A. I didn't see any of that at my Costco. So I was shocked. They had the C1, the CX, the A1. They had a lot of good panels. They had the X90. They had a lot of it. But I don't know. But Best Buy has nothing. So I just don't. It's a mess right now as far as retail.
Let me definitely. Can I take 1 second? Make sure you guys like the video. I see like half the people have liked the video. So just do that real quick. I know it's a pain in the butt. I keep saying that. And two,
thank you.
And two, I'm sorry if Dave Whelan's still on here, but I have to acknowledge the Bucks in 6, the Milwaukee Bucks, the world champions. I'm from Wisconsin. I used to be a huge Bucks fan, not a huge Bucks fan anymore, but hey, you know what? Giannis got a big championship. This isn't a sports talk, but I thought we'd mention congratulations to my home state, Milwaukee Bucks, and a lot of the people that I know haven't slept. They're partying, and like it's been pretty crazy over there in Wisconsin. So
that's awesome.
What
performance too, by the way, Giannis. Oh my god!
Yeah, my god, 50 points. Come on, man.
Every now and then, I want a team that's not the Lakers, the Celtics. You know,
you gotta
have some other team win every now and then. And
I would have been
stories.
I would have been completely fine with either team winning because I really wanted Chris Paul to like get a chance. But you know, I'm not from Phoenix and I have no ties to the Phoenix Suns. Besides, I used to like Barkley, you know, so I like the Suns for that reason. But always been a fan of just, you know, the Phoenix Suns teams and whatever. Tough, man. They kind of fell apart. They I think what happened is that the Bucks found a way to defend those guys, and that's what happened. And Giannis took over, man. No one else played well in the last game except Giannis. I mean, he just dominated that game.
Well, he came off an injury and then also heard all the crap and talked about him, and he just destroyed people. He was getting tripled. Plus, the defense awful.
Last night, man. I mean, last night was a game where if he would have folded, the Suns could have won, right? Absolutely. And what happened? He silenced all the critics, man. He silenced it.
He was getting triple teamed. It was unbelievable.
Well, that's why they have him on the team, right? I mean, everyone.
He was a huge gamble though, where he's from. I mean, he was nobody. I mean, it's unbelievable. So, and he's a positive guy. So I like that he's not teaming up with other people. That's why I wasn't rooting for Chris Paul. jump from these different teams, creating all these dream teams. Good for Giannis.
Agreed. Here's a great question. I spoke to my MediaTek HDMI 2.1 video. Okay, so is it fixable via firmware updates, or is it a hardware fault which cannot be fixed? So it's a combination of the two things. If your hardware has obstacles, then you use firmware to get around those obstacles. The question is, and this is the hard part, can you get 4K 120 with a firmware update, VRR? 4K 120 VRR, that's one. eARC should be fixable. Okay, that is a lip sync. That is dropped audio. It's been done before at the 2.0. It shouldn't be hard to do at 2.1. VRR, however, at 4K 120 has never been done at the 2.0, HDMI 2.0 level. HDMI 2.1, VRR, 4K 120. That's all new. And I don't think it can be fixed, and this is why. Sony has to work with MediaTek. And Sony engineers has to know how to do VRR. MediaTek has to share their engineering skills with Sony. You have two completely different teams, right? One is Japanese, one is not. And
one is not.
I think they're either Chinese or Taiwanese, right? I forgot which one. I apologize. I just know that MediaTek is not Japanese.
That was awesome, though. One is not.
One is.
It's very difficult. And
I'm Ron Burgundy.
I can't believe I'm not drinking on this live stream.
So, and of course, in my opinion, and hey, I would love for Sony to prove me wrong. Obviously, it helps everyone, but the reality is, it's a first adopter problem. And well, I'm going to let you take over on this opinion, Brian, because I know you talk about this all the time. Because this is really tech therapy right now.
For which part? The VRR? Not being available?
Just the HDMI 2.1, the VRR, anything that's not LG.
I went around that with Denon. Obviously, I bought the AK, was a 6700H. I kept it. I have the splitter. They basically sent me that workaround. At least but it's a workaround. I mean, it's not very elegant. It's just unfortunate because, again, if it affects the picture quality to any degree, then you're taking something as amazing as the A90J and giving it a disadvantage. And you don't want people that spent that kind of money to feel that way.
Right.
I personally don't really think that VRR was something we really needed all that much of, considering most of these games have VSync enabled. But I hate this. Don't use the word hate often, but don't promise me what's not coming. And we see that in gaming all the time. We're these beta testers, and we should not be beta testers at $8,000. So if that's what bothers me, and even me, like I have a receiver that's 11 channels. That's what, $3,000 that I needed to get an HDMI switch for. I mean, like that's absurd. It's absurd.
And well, here, Keep It Classy is saying, you know what? His CEC issue is fixed. No updates, no changes. It just works. And that unpredictability, I guess, is what kind of scares people. It's like, wait a minute, what did I do to make it not work? And what did I do to make it work? Like, what did I do? And if you don't know what you did, you're just praying that it doesn't stop working, right? Or it's a secret firmware update that you didn't know about, and they just snuck it in, right? We don't know, and that's kind of crazy.
And the dirtiest word in technology is intermittent. Oh, it's an intermittent problem. I have 11 channels. No, I have 4 channels. Oh, that's good now. It's like we hope technology, they definitely patched that. Just didn't put it in their firmware. But
when you're on the phone with customer service and you can't reproduce the problem, you sound like a fool. You're like, well, it didn't work before I called you, but now that I called you, it works. I don't know what to say. And then you hang up and it stops working.
Yep. Intermittent, terrible word for technology.
Yeah. Man. Okay. And
I'm just keeping the sports chat alive in the comments.
Yeah, I'm seeing that. And if I missed your question, please ask away. We don't have any super chats going or anything, so everyone has priority as long as I see it, right?
But I do want to talk about what we talked about earlier with VRR.
Go for it.
We mentioned this off camera the other day, was when we had the Ratchet and Clank game. For those of you that are aware of that game, was updated to PS5. They had a fidelity mode which capped at 30 FPS. Then they added a fidelity mode that had 40 FPS. The problem is in the comments, or not in the comments, in the settings, it's called 120 hertz mode. So we were talking about, well, you should still be good because your 4K display from last year is 120 hertz. You should still be fine because the game is only doing 40 FPS. But the way they have done it is it's still considered a 120 FPS mode. But if you've had a panel from last year, you'll get 40 FPS at 1080p. That's a huge problem.
Yeah.
For especially if games are going to start being fixed that way, because they're giving me 40 FPS, they're calling it 120 hertz. The problem is you're downgrading last year's people to 1080p. So it is a big deal. Now, not because the panels that we have need it, because we do 4K 60 on the TVs that we have, but if they keep fixing games this way, it's going to be an issue for those from last year.
Yeah. And I think the developers have to step in at this point because they don't trust that. And we're talking about Sony specifically. Is Sony communicating what their timeline for any of these things are? Developers are in some games, they have to go in and start pulling back on the graphics to make sure you get the smoother frame rates, because frame rates is more important than graphic quality. If you're at 20 frames per second, that's unplayable. Pull it back and get it back up to above 30. And
well, that Ratchet and Clank is phenomenal because the Ratchet and Clank literally goes from 30 FPS with all the bells and whistles. By adding that extra 10 FPS, it feels like 60 in comparison. Mm-hmm. However, if you don't have HDMI 2.1, you're losing the 4K. And that shouldn't be the case because you still have a panel capable of 4K 60. But it's coming in as 4K 120. And Digital Foundry cleared that up yesterday. That's not something you would ever predict.
Did you ever get a chance to listen to the Q950A before you had to return it?
No,
Andy wants to.
I did not. My wife said no. So it's actually still sitting in a box. And I did not want to open it and review it. But it's just there. Having a 11-channel system downstairs, she's like, you'll have no speakers in this living room. And I was just hard capped at that.
Right.
Sorry.
I know we have KG and Classy in the chat. So I think this kind of applies to them as well. Phil82, now we're into it. We're a year into it. Yeah, almost a year into it, right? We have all the games out. We have the TVs. Which is the better game console? PS5 or Series X? I'll start real quick. Series X is the stronger, technical, better engineered console for developers to push the limits of their performance. PS5, if it's not the third-party game, I think if it's internal, it's a Sony exclusive, their games are great, but I think overall, given what Microsoft is doing, acquiring all of these publishers and making some of them exclusive to the Series X, and the Series X offering now Dolby Vision gaming at 4K 120, I have to say it is the better console objectively, and motion subjectively, right? It's got VRR. Okay, now I'm going to rest my piece. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
Go ahead, B.
I like both of them. I like the PS5 because I like the remotes. I like the sound and the shock of the remotes. I love those. They're so much more fun. But that's a small thing. So, I think it comes down to like what games you like. And I think with the Sony TV, PS5, I feel comfortable. But I'm like 50-50 because my son started off liking the PS5 better, and now he's back to the X Series X and doesn't even care about the PS5. And he wants me to trade the PS5 in for an Oculus. So I'm like, come on, man, seriously?
You put it on eBay, you're going to get good money.
My wife will not let me get rid of it. There's no way. I don't know if you guys saw that installation video of the 3 TVs, but my wife is like hardcore PS5.
Okay, never mind. Wife rules. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Brian, our resident gamer, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I like the PS5 for it's new. It's just new. Has a new feel. I don't love the design. I don't love the way it looks. I like that they have the new dashboard. I don't like this problem with their memory, moving games around, no storage at all, no Atmos, no Dolby Vision. I do like that its exclusives are always going to be better, a lot like Nintendo. As far as which one's better, for me, the Series X is just a better piece of equipment. It's more powerful, and it's so much more supported in terms of bringing me. I mean, the Xbox One X had VRR, and Sony as far as I'm concerned, to me, the Series X is just it's a decent PC.
Oh yeah,
and they just keep supporting this 120 FPS boost feature, Game Pass. So they don't have the exclusives just yet, but I think it's overall a better console.
And Kyle Westbrook has a great comment for us. to this point. On the PS5, you can set 4K transfer rate to -1, and it will get rid of the banding in 4K 120 hertz, but the picture quality doesn't look as good.
Yeah, I can't.
What you give, you take away. Choose -2, and then you're rendering at 1080p 120 hertz. You're talking about, right? When you
Yeah.
fix something, they got to go and compensate somewhere else. The processor has its limits.
And Kyle, that's an awesome piece of information. But those of us in the heavyweight division, that is a no-go.
Yeah.
Because anything over 55 inches, we're at 83 now. It will look 1080p does not look good.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Well, okay, you have the heavyweight division. 1080p is gonna look soft, right? 4K, great. 8K, not necessary, but yeah, 1080p, 77-inch, can't do that either. Agreed.
It's not clean, but it just doesn't look. It just looks fuzzy.
And Keep It Classy would like to lob criticism of the PS5. Launched half-baked, but simply for the library. Hey, if you're a loyalist to the PS5 game library, there you have it. It really comes down to the games. And those games that are exclusive to PS5 are actually pretty good. Like Ratchet and Clank, looks great. Miles Morales, I love that game, right?
Yeah.
But that's about it. If you're looking at a lot of the cross-play with third-party, it's got to be the Series X. Definitely.
Well, but being launched half-baked, he's absolutely right. Just the storage issue is ridiculous. The Xbox, I literally move my stuff around. Now they just patched it where you can have an internal. They don't even have an external storage offered. So I've had to delete games, move them over. It's a nightmare.
It is.
If you're gonna get Goat Simulator, got to get the X Series X. You play Goat Simulator?
No, I've not.
My son plays. These guys are riding
Never
goats
heard of
around
it.
the city. It's hilarious. Or they're kicking each other with goat. It's so. I thought maybe that'd be maybe
Here's
people
a
in the
good
comments
question.
know what Goat Simulator is, but my kids just get the funniest games. Or the one called Thick Legends, on Roblox or something, where they're like,
or Roblox,
they roll around and they eat other things, and they just get bigger and bigger and bigger, and they just destroy things. It's hilarious.
Here's a great question for you, Brian. Nintendo Switch, 1080p, right? Larger TVs. Forget 65. How's it going to look on a 77, on an 83, 85 inch? Is it going to look terrible? Is it going to look great? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it won't look terrible. The way the Switch, the way their games are, they're anti-aliasing. Their games to me never look real smooth, even on the Switch itself. At 65, as long as you're back a distance, you'll be fine. It's just the way Nintendo's always been. It includes surround sound until recently, so they're not really. I think you'll be fine. I wouldn't be right on top of it though.
And I come from the generation of Ataris and ColecoVision. The Nintendo Switch at 1080p on an 85-inch is better than anything I ever had as a kid. So a lot of people are just like, oh, this is not good enough. They're looking. When it comes to gameplay, at the end of the day, you're just into the game. You forget that it's 1080p. So we're talking about fine-tuning the best of the best. But it's a game. I think it's fine.
So Tech with KG asked about the Ratchet and Clank, and KG, you can check it out on Digital Foundry, but what they basically did was create a 120 FPS mode, which actually gives an extra 10 FPS to 40, which has all the fidelity mode. You didn't lose anything in terms of image quality. So instead of having the best image at 30 FPS, and then you have the other ray tracing one, you get the one that's full fidelity, but at 40 FPS. And that 10% or that 10 FPS is amazing. The challenge for us, though, recommending TVs without HDMI 2.1 is they're going to be enjoying it at 1080p because they don't have 120 hertz 4K capabilities, which it's using. So it's a great way to update a lot of old games. It's just if you don't have HDMI 2.1, it's going to be a concern.
Yep. Now, this is something that some people actually are seriously considering. 77-inch A9G. It's about, 3 years old now? Maybe 4, possibly, if you got it early when it first released. 83-inch A90J, worth the upgrade. Maybe the better question is 83-inch C1, worth the upgrade. I would upgrade to an LG C1 before the 83-inch A90J, only because it's $2,000 cheaper, and you will notice the difference on the C1, both in terms of everything, motion, black depth, and also the gaming capabilities, right? It works. HDMI 2.1 with eARC works, no problem. So unless you have a specific system set up that's home cinema only, 83C1 would be my choice. But yeah, 8380J is the sophisticated choice for the dedicated cinema. What are your thoughts on going from a 77A9G to the 83 inch?
If you got the money, man.
Yeah.
If you got the cash, I don't know. I mean, you're gonna definitely brighter. You know, like I had an A8H, and it's definitely brighter. You know, there's no question about it. Like you see in like skin tones and in like certain scenes, it's like wow, it's like it feels twice as bright in small highlights. You know, like really a lot brighter. But I mean, it's $8,000. So you know, I couldn't recommend it in good faith and be like, of course, everybody should that has a 77-inch OLED from 2 years ago.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, I mean, for Ryan, again, Brandon's right, and I hear this a lot with the A90J. It kind of, I had a terrible comment that said that the 80J was better than the A90J because it was more expensive, which is absurd. If you have the money, then it's better. And I think whether it's incrementally better, those of us that want high performance items, you're going to pay thousands for a few percent. Yeah. So if Ryan has the money and you like the look of the A9G being a master series and all that entails, the A90J is the next logical upgrade. I think C1 might not feel the same just because it's a different processor and just the way LG shows their image. Yeah, Amanda, what's up?
Also, like, you know, people that have a Bugatti don't really care. They don't really care that they could get the crap beat out of them by a Tesla Plaid, right? Like they're gonna get smoked, but so they still have $1 million car, you know, so they don't care.
Absolutely, they don't care.
Yeah.
So Amanda, to your point, the LG QNED is out. We'll start with the QNED 99, which I have here. You see that? Add to cart. This is their 8K 65-inch. The problem is the QNED 90, the 4K. It appears to be out, but they may be out of stock. So when I checked on the QNED 90, it was not available for me to purchase. But then Keep It Classy in Ohio said that it was in his warehouse. So it's something you should keep in mind. If you really want it, give Best Buy a call. Maybe locally, you can get it from your distributors, but it's out for sure.
But Amanda, I would say if you follow our channels and you do care about what reviewers say, I can't recommend buying it until it's reviewed. Because you'll be paying for something sight unseen. And if you do follow us and the thing turns out to be a blooming mess, you'll have buyer's remorse immediately. So I would say don't buy it until you see it reviewed. Not even by us, by anybody. Just have to wait.
And most importantly, it's at launch. It's a launch price. Within the next, I guarantee you, in 30 days, price drops across the board, especially once the X95J comes out. And of course, the Samsung will press their prices down further to make sure you buy the QN98 or the QN85A over the QNED 90 or 99. So definitely do not buy anytime soon. Wait for the clamor and excitement to die down. And I think you'll get a good price if you end up with that.
I can get the QNED. I can get the QNED 99 this weekend.
You can. Why don't you? What's holding you back, my friend?
I don't know. I didn't even know. I'm still messing around with this 83-inch TV. I'm just like, I'm about ready. Like, here's the thing. I was getting ready to like be like, okay, what's next? You know? And so it says 90 series, the class 99 series QNED 8K. I can get a 65-inch 3500. I haven't looked into it, but then there's also the actual Nano 99 too, right?
That's not the one.
That's the
okay.
Yeah, don't go with anything with the word nano. Stay away.
My bad. No, so this QNED I can get Saturday. I could have it delivered by Saturday. 65-inch.
Man, I have to say, I heard good things about the QNED 99, and seeing some of the promo videos in Australia that compared the QNED 99 to the 90, I've lost interest in the 90 because lifted blacks and blooming was obvious in that promo video from LG Regional in Australia. It looks like the 99 is the one to get, because if you're going to go with the 90, you might as well just get the QN90A from Samsung, or even their 85 is going to have deeper blacks. But of course, it's IPS. You get the wide viewing angle. So,
well, with them too, in their lineup, their 8K Nano was a million times better than the other Nano. So I would be apprehensive to pull the trigger on anything other than the flagship.
Agreed. Definitely.
So do people think that I should get this? I don't know. I could have it by Friday. It says I had it. I had a different. I was like checking addresses around the nation just to see like who has these TVs, and so I had it on a different one. I can actually get it Friday. So people, let me know in the comments. Should I get this? I'll buy it right now, and I'll have it here by Friday, and I'd have a review by next Saturday. Let me know.
And you need to compare it to your memory of the QN98 because ultimately that's what it's going to come down to. It's a little bit more expensive.
I think I could do a decent job with the Hisense here because I have the Hisense and I know it'd have to be better than that, obviously. Yes. It'd have to be better than that. So if I was better than that, then I would start to be like, okay, where are we at? But, I don't have, but I got to get the QN90A. And so I'm crazy like a cat, man. I might just grab them both and then be like, here we go. Let's get it.
There you go. This is a great time.
That's the way to go.
Good times, man. Great question, Joe. Thoughts on the Hisense U90Gs? So this is the dual cell, and my initial impressions of its release in the USA was based off of the Australian model that's been out and is not selling well at all. And so I accused Hisense of just repackaging and giving us an old TV. And so Hisense reached out to me and says, whoa. It's a different TV. We've fixed it. We made it brighter. It is a different TV. It is not the same. We have completely re-engineered it for the USA. So don't take anything out of Australia this year or last year as a sign of what the USA is going to get. Like, okay, fair enough. So I enlisted that video and I said, give it to me. And as soon as I get it, we'll know. So Joe, two things we know. The 75-inch will be brighter and it should have better color. Now, how much brighter, how much better color volume, all that stuff, we're going to have to get it in. But at least Hisense has assured me that it will be brighter than any other dual cell they've had to date. So that's something. But my biggest deal is how much it's going to cost. Because it's a 75-inch. 77-inch OLEDs are now costing at $3,000. They may drop just below $3,000 by Black Friday. Can the dual cell compete? So let's just give them the benefit of the doubt. You gentlemen, Brandon and Brian, if a dual cell TV can get as deep of a black as an OLED, almost better than the QN90A for the sake of argument, not as bright as the QN90A, but brighter than an OLED, brighter than either the Panasonic and the Sony A90J. Just for the sake of argument, what would it have to cost for you to pick it over a $3,000 LG?
Go ahead, Brian. I'm trying to.
Honestly, near black isn't good enough. You'd have to be black, and you'd have to be significantly brighter than the QN90A for me to recommend it. I mean, if we're going to say we're going to give you OLED blacks with LED peak brightness, then I'd rather just get a Samsung QN90A.
Why was that? Why would you choose the Hisense?
I mean, just because if you're going for Hisense, if you're going to tell me that you're getting close to black, but you're not promising me OLED blacks,
right,
and you're not quite as bright, then to me, you're not doing either one of them good enough.
Okay.
Do you follow me? So you better be
I have
brighter.
to agree with you, right? Because
what's the point then?
If you saw my recent review of the Sony A80J, where I pulled out the QNED 90 with the A90J, right? Put a actually, I haven't posted it yet. I will be posting that. I'll be posting the Sony X80J. It's a VA panel only, 50-inch. It'll be compared to the A90J, its flagship oldest brother, against the QN90A. And what I noticed was that the QN90A and the A90J, in so many of those dark scenes, they were indistinguishable. I was like, wow, Samsung did a great job in these scenes. This is as black as it's supposed to be. But we talked about how it crushed some things it shouldn't crush to get there, right? But overall, it looked nearly OLED-like. And I'd say 80% of the scenes, right? 10% OLED will be obviously better, but a little bit, not super noticeable. And then it takes you to your point. Well, then why not just pay the same price for a QN90A with gaming features? Well, and HDMI 2.1 VR works.
And then getting back to what Brandon said about the elegance of the operating system. So I don't, and that's where Hisense and TCL have to pull away. And I go same with the algorithm of their local dimming. They have to be able to, get better with making it more elegant. That's the processing that Sony, LG, and Samsung have, cultivated for years.
Here's a great question, Joe. I have a mix use of movies, gaming, sports, SDR content. I'm looking at the A90J 65-inch and the A80J 70-inch. A80J ABL kicks in a lot. and shows image retention. Should I go for the A80J 77 or the A90J 65? Oh, we talked about this yesterday, Brian, about the ABL deal and all that stuff. So I like to go large. I mean, as good as the A90J 65 is, I think the 77-inch more often than not is still going to be that larger TV, that immersion that you're not going to get with the 65-inch. And, well, I say go with the 77-inch. But then he's complaining about the ABL. What are your thoughts about this, Brian?
Here's the ABL thing kills me because I have a CX, I have an A80, I've had the A9S. ABL's never been an issue for me. Now, if you're going to sit with a game paused, it's going to dim, it's going to darken. I don't watch hockey. My A80J, I've had the 77-inch now for a month. I've not seen it dim at all. So, I mean, if Joe has seen that himself, or are you just hearing a lot of what people are saying? I think the ABL thing is a little out of hand. I think I've not noticed it dim. I play games on it. Other than I'm not a hockey fan. If you want to pause the screen and look at the sky, it's going to dim. But unless you're doing that, I mean, I haven't seen any issues with it. Not with the C1, not with the G1. It's just I think it's gotten to be either you have to be really sensitive to it, but you know, that's what. And look, that's what he's saying it here. That's what Keep It Classy is saying. I think people are seeing that as ABL. That is not ABL. I mean, you're seeing basically your screen is going into like almost screensaver mode. It's getting darker. So, you know, Joe, you got to go out there and see things for yourself, my friend. The A80J 77 versus a 65-inch A9G, there's no contest. The size difference is massive.
Yeah,
right here.
So I'm being
Size
forceful
difference.
now.
Yeah,
you can't. There's no way. I literally
like an iPad.
There's no way I could recommend a smaller A90J. I mean, I barely can recommend the same size TV because of its differences. So like, there's no way I can. You know, it's actually less expensive to get the 77 A80J than it is the 65 A90J. And it's a little better, but it's that 12-inch difference in size is huge, like you're saying. It's just so that's the big difference.
And I'll even say this because people will say this: we'll sit closer. So when my 77 went back, I have a 55-inch. Sitting closer does not make it more immersive. Unless you're a gamer who games with a monitor, a 55-inch doesn't become a 65 because you're 2 feet closer. Right. Immersion is immersion. So, I mean, I have 3 TVs in this room, and the 75 looks like it's a projector compared to the 65 behind me. It's not even in the same universe.
Agreed. I think size makes up for any minor picture quality improvements with the A80J, A90J. I mean, if you watch Digital Trends, Caleb, he doesn't think the A90J is worth it at all. I mean, if you have the money, go ahead, but it just is not that premium price difference, and that's why it's at 83 inches. Because if the A80J was at 83 inches as well, no one would buy the A90J. No,
but to a certain point too, you know, having them not have a 77-inch A90J was a problem.
Agreed. I would have loved it to have that.
They wanted to do that, so I understand the cost. And you know, to borrow a saying from boxing or fighting, a good big man always beats a great little man. But the 80J is very good. Where if you're talking about like a lesser LED versus the A90J, then we have a different conversation. But even an average LED at that size, I would still recommend just for immersion.
Yeah. And Mustafa, the answer is yes. See, I spoke to Valley Electronics, and Robert did reach out. He received the wrong information. His spec PDF was incorrect. The website is correct. It does have only 2 2.1 ports, which was a great disappointment for many people.
Why?
I know.
I gotta stop and say hi to Michael Wyckoff.
Hey, Michael.
I don't respond to the comments during their live streams, guys, but Michael always shouts out. So there he is.
This is the way to do it, though. It's good. I prefer it this way. We can verbalize anything, so we should all just do that.
KG, if you're on, I saw the 2.1 switch everyone's talking about on Amazon. Let us know how good is it in chat. I didn't get a chance to catch your video, but yeah, is it work perfectly? Because it's going to sell out the minute you say yes, thumbs up.
God, yeah.
This switch will solve every Samsung owner's problem, and Sony, right? Because the eARC is shared. Yeah, this is great, and it'll sell out pretty quick. Shortage and all that.
I want like a matrix. If they can give me a HDMI 2.1 matrix, it'd be all over.
I hate switches though.
Yeah, but it's just for convenience. No, I mean, I don't like switches. I just need them for like multiple
Oh, no.
inputs to multiple TVs. Like
Well, I
that'll
know.
be dope.
Well, yeah, when we test them, the splitters are fantastic.
splitters.
When you have HDMI switches, I've had them over the years. You switch, but your preset, I might want that preset to be different. I might want to have different settings for my Series X. I'm still stuck in the same preset.
That's a good
So that's the problem with switches. You switch all day, but you're still
Yep.
using the same picture quality.
True.
So that's why I don't. And then they fail all the time. The little crappy remote.
Phil 82 has a good question as it revisits one of the things we talked about early during the release. The whole glossy versus semi-glossy of the Sony 80J at the 65-inch and the 77-inch. Did we have a final decision whether or not it's noticeable? I mean, does it affect the buying decision because picture quality suffers or is improved either way? What are your thoughts? I mean, is this the only reason he should be considering this, the 77 and 65 because of the glossy? Is it a deal breaker?
Go ahead, B.
There's an airplane going over. I didn't want you guys to have to hear that.
That's fine.
No,
I know
but
that
anyway.
the branding. Yeah, you complain about the semi-gloss.
I don't.
what
I'm
do you
not.
think?
It was just a difference. I mean,
Yeah,
it
so it wasn't a
just
big deal.
didn't handle the reflections. Like if we're talking like like Samsung QNED is like handling the reflections as like 10 out of 10 or whatever. Let's just say that. And OLEDs are like an 8 out of 10, but they're not quite as bright. Or say a 9, they're 9 out of 10 as far as handling reflections, but they're just not brighter, so you see a little bit more reflection, right? I would say it's just like the next step down. It's still way above like an X900H or a Samsung frame. Like you can see that reflection right behind me. It's not like that, it's not that matte like. It's just a touch worse than the OLEDs. And I just noticed it because it was, just a little bit semi-gloss or whatever. So no, I wouldn't at all say it's like a, I couldn't say no, that's a deal breaker. So I don't know. So wait, he said it's compared to the 80-inch. I don't know. If you have them both,
Got to go with the
He saw
77.
him, he saw him at Costco.
the 77-inch seems to have more pop because it's 12 inches larger, like Brian
That's
and I
right.
just said.
Yep.
It's 12 inches larger.
It'll
Every
always be
TV
brighter.
looks, because you're at the same distance from all these TVs at Costco. One's 12 inches bigger. It looks brighter. That's the end of the story.
Yeah, Phil, that's what I mean. I like the screen better on the 77-inch A80J. I don't love this matte, blurry. This is the X90 behind me. I'm not a fan of it. It's like the way it looks. Off, actually, more than anything. But what Brandon's saying is you are noticing the size difference. They'll say it adds a little bit of clarity, but what you're seeing is a gigantic TV. Because to respond to that, too, is even the X90 and the 900H in store, they look amazing at 85. And I do feel they are brighter because I think the zone count is different for them. But I wouldn't base my decision on that.
And again, the blur is not, the matte is not as bad as that X90J behind him. The X90J is definitely more of a matte-like finish. The 65-inch A80J is like a lot closer to OLED. It's almost exactly like OLED, but just has a hint, like, I don't even know what it is, like semi-gloss versus like matte or like flat,
Right.
Yeah.
Lance has a great comment. FOMO, I'm not sure the frames were matched. In the second example, in your video showing the explosion from the ship, he's referring to the comparison between the X95J and X90J in the Chinese review. Look at the ship in the right-hand corner. There are different spot positions. Great point, Lance. Since I didn't do the video, I should not have assumed that they matched the frame. So when you're splitting between two TVs in the same source, oftentimes one TV may have slower latency than the other, and it happens to me all the time. When I'm comparing Sony with Samsung, the Samsung is a faster, about 8 frames faster than the Sony. So I have to go in there and I have to match the frames up. So Lance, this makes it all the worse for the X95J. So let's just take Lance's comment. Worst case scenario for the X95, if I matched it up and now the X90J is a little bit brighter, it reduces the HDR advantage of the X95J. So I'm giving the X95J every benefit of the doubt I could. And even if the frame matching ends up being flawed, suddenly the X95J has maybe better color volume, and that's about it. HDR performance, a wash, brightness, a wash, but the specs make it look brighter. But then many of you know, if you have source content that doesn't require 1,000 nits, they're going to end up looking the same. One's not going to be brighter. That's why Aquaman was such a good comparison. But when you guys saw my Aquaman comparison where the octopus is playing the drums, the 95J, based on that video recording, I'm assuming that they matched their ISO properly. The 95J wasn't noticeably brighter unless I put it under the microscope the way I did. So yeah, thank you for that comment. So we're going to wrap it up maybe in the next 5 minutes if you guys don't have any pressing questions. And good night, TechMed. Thank you for coming by.
I should have said real quick, is that when the video started, I was late to it, is that we do have to, as much as we're basing the entire stream on that, same with the QNED, we are basing it on a review where we don't know, something that's not fully updated. It's not like it's released in where it's made. So we have to still look at the fact that I can't even understand the video. So we like
FOMO just said that I think that's just like the weight of the remote. It's not actually the brightness. It's like 1,100 grams. We have no idea.
I mean, we've had things like that in the past. We are speculating. That's what we do, and we don't have to be correct. But we have to, even with I'm disappointed in the numbers. I wanted them to be much better, but we'll still at the end of it have to wait for it to be released here.
Absolutely.
And then be fully updated, because Sony is, they fixed the X90 in many ways. Updates are, I'm not sure if they prioritize where it was released, so, and I don't know that reviewer. You could turn local dimming down. You can make things look however you want. And we know in YouTube, if you want to cripple an image for views, you can easily do that.
Easily.
I have no idea if that's what's happening here, but I can't be blind and be like, that's impossible. That can't happen. So you have to. So I mean, at the end of the day, we have to actually just say, okay, we'll wait. But that's what we do. We break down the information as it comes. That's why we don't have to be. We're not reporters. We can say that, but I would still be hopeful. But it's definitely knocking my expectations down.
And to that point, one of the reasons why I wanted to put out a review early is to let Sony know, all the Sony marketers, all the Sony reps out there, hey, we're seeing this review out of China, and right now we're not impressed. Assuming my bad Chinese is correct. I'm reading between the pictures and everything, right? Sony reps are like, oh, wow, this is not a good review out of China. Guys, let's go back and bump up the processing, make the 95J better. Let's delay the release and make it better out the gate. Hopefully they don't cripple the 90J, because the 90J is amazing based on that review, right? Like, wow, the 90J actually looks pretty good. So yeah, I hope Sony does something to make the 95J as good as it can be, and not a half-baked launch like the X90H was last year, where by the end of the year it was a completely different TV. Remember that? Or the X90J, the first week, motion and everything was terrible. 3 weeks later, suddenly it's magically awesome. That could have been the X95J. It literally was released in the last week in China. By the time it gets to the US, all the firmware update, well, not all, but some of the firmware updates are in, could be a lot better. Because the X90H is better now.
And what we're hearing for the HDMI 2.1, speaking with Robert, the engineers are still trying to say that they're waiting simply because of remote functionality, HDMI spec stuff, and they're holding that up. I think they're holding it up because they can't fully do it. I think they also don't have their whole lineup out. But as far as getting information, what's funny is you did your video the other day, and right away, Samsung dropped a video about like true gaming performance. So I'm sure they're like, oh, let's just jump in here real quick. And that was like a random video they put up. So I think they do pay attention to the larger channels, not little old me. But I think like immediately they put out like, for true gaming, here is, and they did a video on it, like just, like a promo. On their website. I was like, wow. So I mean, it does get the information out there, which is why it's important, that we go around it. And I mean, it's amazing too. I know we're leaving the stream, but there's so many reviews out there, whether it's Samsung, Sony, where even the 8K, they're getting 10 out of 10. I mean, they're all written reviews. They're from very established places, but it's amazing how there is no conversation. They just put it out there. Perfect, amazing, 10 out of 10. QNED, 10 out of 10. It's hard to trust, but I mean, it is interesting.
So Tyson has a comment that I'd like to address for sure. Doesn't the Hisense U90G, that's the dual cell, support VR, Dolby, and HDMI 2.1? So the word support is such a loaded question, as we know. Just because they support it doesn't mean it looks good. I'm not saying it looks bad, by all means, right? But Samsung Q90T supported VRR. The Samsung Q90R supported VRR. Did not look good. This year, it looks great with the QN90A and the rest of the 2021 lineup. They fixed it. So having VRR doesn't mean it works well, because most Samsung owners a year or 2 years ago, they just turned it off, right? And so the U90G may have VRR. Question is, oh, forget the U90G, the U8G, people are complaining VRR is not working properly. I know both Tech with KG and Classy, they have videos out on the issues with the VRR. So definitely catch those videos. But just because they have it doesn't mean it works well. So yeah, 2.1 is still an alpha stage, no doubt about it. Okay, and Mustafa, thank you for this. I was looking for an excuse to give you guys this update. Any future plans from Samsung, QD OLED, OLED Mini LED? So Mini LED is out, works great, but as far as Mini LED is concerned, I think it would have looked just as good without the Mini LED.
Absolutely.
Why? 800 dimming zones. Yeah, you can. Look at how good the Sony looked with only 60, right? Forget Mini LED. It is a great buzzword, but imagine if it was $200 cheaper without the Mini LED. I'd still buy it. The Mini LED, I don't think brought much to the table.
No.
And it became a distraction. I think it would have looked just as good without it, honestly, because it's only a little bit better than the Q90R. And in speaking to Bob O'Brien of the SEC, he was very upfront. Mini LED does nothing for picture quality other than make it brighter, but it doesn't help with darkroom control. The top three things that will affect native contrast and darkroom is the VA panel, VA over IPS, how many dimming zones you have, the processing of that dimming zone, of those dimming zones, and lastly is the optical distance, the OD0 between the actual backlit LEDs and the rest of the panel. And Mini LED allows you to get it even closer, but it's not the Mini LED itself, it's that optical distance, and that is still minor compared to the other two, right? So yeah, now QD OLED. So Samsung Display is having a problem getting Samsung Electronics to buy QD OLED. The most recent update is Samsung Electronics has said to Samsung Display, all right, tell you what, we'll buy the QD OLED if you make more of these special chips for us, because we're trying to sell micro LED TVs. They're like, well, we don't normally do that, but we don't care. Do it and we'll buy some QD OLEDs. So as you can see, they don't even want the QD OLED. They're trying to leverage this QD OLED lack of interest because frankly, it appears that the OLED part of QD OLED is holding it back. So, but we'll wait and see. This is just what's coming out of Korea. The OLED part is not getting bright enough. The blues are just not good enough. We want QD micro LED or QD LED or QD LCD, but the OLED part I think is the issue. So we'll see. And what else for Samsung? I think they'll be on the Mini LED until QNED comes out, and that's the true QNED, not LG's QNED.
Well,
and that's a QD.
I can't wait till they say that we have. Well, look, we have 12-bit, but we can't do 12-bit color.
I know. That's the Mini
I have
LED.
8K, but I can't show you 8K. So It's always, and it's just marketing. I mean, they needed something to change. Mini LED, I think, easily could be accomplished with regular LEDs. Keep your 10,000 mini LEDs and give me 400 LEDs.
Yeah,
it's not, to me, it has not changed light control at all. It has not minimized blooming at all. I don't find it to be brighter than the TVs in the past or higher contrast ratio. To me, it's just been, that's why 8K is here. It's not here because it's worth getting. It's just a big 8. It's more than 4, and it's a reason to buy. Otherwise, nobody would be buying anything. And that's same with HDMI 2.1. The consoles are definitely in line with the TVs. There has to be a reason to buy TVs, and that's why they're pushing it.
Yep. And Classy says panel lottery is still alive and well. They're trying to mix and match and get rid of some of their old supplies, mixing it in. Shortages will do that as well. And here's a comment. Will Samsung, this implies that Samsung may have OLED TVs, and I should have mentioned that. So my view is if Samsung TV does sell OLEDs, they will be for things like the Zero or the Frame. I don't think they're going to go with high performance OLED because the high performance TVs are known for brightness. Like the QN90A super bright. If they go OLED, they can't do it. Even with a heatsink, they cannot get that bright.
No.
So Samsung's gonna have to decide with OLED, how are they going to position that TV? I think it'll just be a lifestyle type of TV, not a cinema movie performance TV that you're getting from Sony.
Well, they're not going to do Dolby Vision anyway, so
Oh yeah, I know.
they're never going to do it because they're never
I
going to
don't think
pay
so.
for that licensing. They don't have to. They're the largest in the world. They're like, what are you kidding me? I'm not paying for that. And they
Yeah.
have their HDR10 plus and all that, and so it's never going to happen.
Okay, I'll take this last question. Hey, Spillage Village, welcome over. Thank you for coming. FOMO, how's the home theater coming? Will it be Atmos or Oro 3D? So my home theater will be both. It's a trade-off. It has both Atmos and Oro 3D. I will do the unified speaker setup so that I can do both. Well, it'll be set up at 30 degrees, optimized for Oro 3D, but Atmos has updated its format to accept 30-degree angle, and it will have a top channel or a voice of God channel. In listening to the recent interview with the founder of Oro 3D on the Hi-Fi Channels podcast, he said that unless your screen is really big, you don't need a center height channel. So I'm just going to have 5 ceiling channels, the voice of God, and the 4 plus 9 bed channels to make sure I have the surround sound effect. And then I finished the electrical yesterday, so now I can start plugging all my active speakers to the ceiling.
There you go.
Yes, and new speakers came in. I just got the Per-Listen bookshelves from Matt Pose. He's a dealer for Per-Listen. These are the only THX Dominus rated speakers. I'm going to use those for 2-channel listening in that large room. So yeah, theater's coming along. Now it won't be complete until I get the 83-inch A90J from Brandon. But I'll get the audio up and running, and then Brandon will come by whenever, right? September, August, and we'll get that done. So thanks for asking. How about you guys? Let's talk about what's happening in your world, your life, and we'll see. And then we'll close out with updates and future content on your channels. Brian, we'll start with you. What's happening? How's is that your home improvement behind you? Is that
I've been making very little content, unfortunately, because I had a flood in my basement. So I'm rebuilding that. I have to order a new TV, plug in my Dolby Atmos. I won't be doing any height center channels. I have 11.2, but I have to decide on what to buy for that space. And I'm leaning right now towards the 83-inch C1, based primarily just on gaming. The 83-inch A90J is a possibility. It's a gorgeous panel, but I just game down there. So that's what I'm kind of doing, just trying to enjoy the summer, and that's about it. But I'll definitely be doing more content once the construction is done. It's been about 4 months.
Well, and speaking of content, you need to be available when I'm there in September for the shootout. I'm going to do a pre-show. You know how you have those Oscar pre-shows?
Yep.
We need to do a pre-show the day before the actual live stream and just get behind the scenes. And then on the day of the live stream, I was thinking of, those golfing channels where they're whispering, all right, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I'm so tempted to, hey, Shane, give me your audio so Brian, I can start doing it.
We're gonna be there. I mean, it's going to be a great event. I mean, they're going, they missed it last year, so we're going to have a blast. You'll see a few of us there. Obviously, it's going to be awesome. Plus, having 4K versus 8K, that's going to be very interesting when they match them. But being able to see them all fully calibrated, we'll see how they look. But we're going to have a blast. September is going to be amazing.
I think so. And Brandon, you are busy. You got all this stuff lined up. Now suddenly the QNED is coming. What are your plans for the next week or two? Share.
Well, I'm going to be doing a final review on the A90J. Like I felt like I didn't hit everything I needed to on the first pass, and I didn't have the larger TV. So now I'm kind of like a 83-inch final review, all 83-inch footage and everything. So that's going to be Saturday, and then after that, I wanted to get a couple LED TVs. I have a couple things coming up that are kind of going to be cool surprise type things. And then, after that, we're trying to move too, so it's all busy. But then I'm thinking I'm going to go to Cedia out with Techno Dad, Joe and Tell, and Youth Man, and go out to Indianapolis for a few days and
awesome.
Hang and do that, and then I'll be in New York. Oh, actually, I'm going to be in New York first. Sorry. So I'm going to be in New York and DC in a couple of weeks, and then after that, it'll be Cedia. So yeah, it'll be crazy. I'm sure this fall is going to go fast. So it's exciting to get all this stuff done. I hope to make some good reviews. And now it looks like we're about to start a fantasy football league for the Pass the Remote channel. So if you
send me the link.
are you guys gonna join? You guys
Let's
do football?
Let's do
Brian,
it.
do you do
I
fantasy
love
football or
fantasy
no?
football.
I don't do it, but I'll try.
No.
It's
Well,
fun.
it's one of those things that, like, if you had never done it before, you might want to team up with one of the guys on here that has and like do it together, because you might get smoked your first year. But I mean, like, hey, if we can get 10 or 12 people that are like in, like, it sounded like Tech with KG wanted in, and some of the guys on here. So I'll throw it together and we can send it out and we can put some teams together. It'd be fun.
That'll be
awesome.
fun. That will be fun for this channel. And Keep It Classy wanted to let us know he'll be there as well at the shootout. So definitely keep it classy. We'll communicate with you, and we'll circle back with you when the day comes, and we'll have a color commentator, a technical analyst, right? We'll have fun that day.
It'll be awesome, man. It'll be cool just to be social with each other in person.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And just be around each other. It's, having all these virtual friendships is great, but nothing like having a beer together and just chilling. All
right. Okay, well, with that is a wrap. Everyone, thank you for coming. We eventually will get enough views so that we can start the super chats all over again. But this is the channel. We're going to have all of our live streams moving forward, and I will attempt to do timestamping and all the channel breakdowns, the chapter breakdowns, so that it's easier to watch and summarize later. So until next time, and if we missed your questions, we'll be back later. Ask next time. Thank you so much for attending, everyone. Stop the FOMO. Subscribe to my channel. Be the installer. Subscribe to his channel. And Brian Whisper Stats 24. Please subscribe to his channel. We'll have all the links below. Bye, guys.
I love you 3000. See you guys.